970 WKHM, Laura Dwyer Schlecke back. She was on assignment last week.
Yeah, I was in Detroit.
Jackie did a great job.
I haven't heard it yet.
Well, what do we put it on the website for?
Well, we've got a new camera, so apparently we're struggling a little with it.
Bill Schlecke, attorney to the stars, is here.
He is here.
I am.
He's been gone a lot.
Yeah, you've been a traveling
I've been a busy boy.
attorney.
I've been a busy boy.
You seem like you're so far away for some reason. You're leaning away
Well,
from me for a reason. Do I stink or
the
something?
beauty is the radio audience has no clue how far away I am from you.
They do now. Well, I was in Detroit last week at the Michigan Municipal League conference.
Oh,
Detroit, downtown Detroit is a cool place.
Is it really?
They've got great things
You know,
going
they've got
on.
a bad reputation.
Eh,
I didn't know that.
Go downtown. Go to the Renaissance Center. Walk the River Walk. There's some cool retail stuff happening. The Whole Foods downtown is really neat.
Mm-hmm.
A little different than the one you see in Ann Arbor, or the two you see in Ann Arbor. So,
I haven't seen any in Ann Arbor.
yeah, this isn't a place that I go to Kroger's.
Oh,
Kroger's is good.
So's Polly's.
Polly's is good too.
Thank you.
Bill goes to Polly's on the way in, and I go to.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you've got your coupons from Country Market. So, we go to both.
All right, so what's the subject
You
today?
need to wake up.
I'm awake. What's the
Oh,
subject
okay.
today?
You don't have any shout-outs?
I have no shout-outs
Uh-oh.
today.
I had a question from a client who was working with a realtor several months ago, and they weren't happy with the person. They did write an offer on a piece of property.
Happiness is a relative thing.
That's
Go
true.
ahead.
That's true. But we wrote an offer on a property, and they signed a buyer agency contract and stuff like that with me. And
Right.
his concern was that he didn't know if he signed a buyer agency contract with the realtor.
With the first person he was working with, you talking about? In other
Yeah.
words, he signed a buyer's agency agreement with you, but he didn't know whether or not he signed a buyer's agency agreement with the prior realtor. That's the question?
Yes.
All right.
I had to laugh because Mark just waved.
Okay. All right. So what do you want to know? What's the exact question? So that's the circumstance. What do you want to know?
Right. So let's pretend that he signed a buyer. He doesn't know, and he doesn't have copies of anything. And I think under our law, realtors have to provide the consumer with copies of everything
That's correct.
in order to be entitled to a commission, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little baffled as to why he's uncertain as to whether he signed the buyer's agency agreement with the first realtor he's working with. It seems rather odd that he doesn't know that. But
I don't think it's odd. I think a lot of people don't get explained the process.
Well, first of all, to answer the simplest question is yes, the realtor has a responsibility under the statute to give him a copy of the fully executed buyer's agency agreement. So he should have gotten that. The fact that he didn't doesn't necessarily mean that he's not obliged by contract to the first realtor, simply because violation of the statute does not abrogate or eliminate a civil claim. That's simply a violation of the statute. The violation of the statute does not necessarily mean that the first buyer's agent is not entitled to a commission. So what he needs to do, or you need to do, somebody needs to find out if the first realtor is still under contract by virtue of that buyer's agency agreement. Get a copy of it if it exists. If it doesn't exist, no harm, no foul. He's entitled to work with somebody else, no obligation of the first one. If in fact he has a contract with the first one, needs to figure out what it says and determine how, or figure out how it's to be terminated so that he doesn't end up being obliged to you under your contract and also obliged to pay a commission under the first one. My bet is that even if he has a contract with the first realtor, that it probably does not provide for a buyer paid commission. It probably provides for a seller paid commission. Creates a different set of issues. So
how can you terminate that?
you got to look at what the language is. You can always an agency contract, like a buyer's agency agreement or a listing agreement with a seller's agent, it comprises two parts. One is the agency part, and the other is the obligation to pay a fee. The principal, the buyer or the seller, can always terminate the agency portion. You can't force someone to continue being your principal. In other words, if the principal wants to fire you as the agent, they can do that. However, the other part of the contract is they may still be obliged to pay you a fee if the terms of the buyer's agency agreement or the terms of the listing agreement are fulfilled. The easiest example is you list your property with a certain realtor. It says if the property is sold within a set period of time, you owe the broker a commission. You terminate that broker as your agent. That doesn't terminate the obligation to pay a commission if the property is sold during that listing period.
What if the broker told the seller they would do certain things and those certain things were not done?
Yeah, that's a separate issue. The other thing is, and there's actually a recent case called Motel Brokers versus Dowd, D-O-U-D, which is a court of appeal. No, it wasn't Motel Brokers. I'm trying to think of the name of the case. It escapes me at the moment. A recent court of appeals case in which the court of appeals held that there must be three things in order to be entitled to a commission. One is you must have the written agreement. Two, there must be a reasonable period of time in the agreement for the performance. In other words, you can't have like a 10-year contract. It's got to be a shorter term. And the protection period after the contract expires must be a reasonable period of time. And then third, the realtor must have provided substantial performance. In other words, if the broker failed to do what the broker said he or she was going to do, that may have terminated the contract or allowed the buyer to get out of the contract. And it is, in fact, Motel Brokers versus Dowd, as I'm sitting here thinking about it. That
Well,
is the
so
case.
in a buyer agency contract, if a buyer signs a contract with a realtor in March or April, and the realtor then doesn't provide them with properties to see, are they failing to do what was promised in the contract?
Well, you have to look at what the contract says they'll do. Buyer's
Well-
agency contract sets forth what the obligations of the buyer's
Well, yeah.
agent are. Let me finish. Okay, and the other thing is, even if it's not set forth in the buyer's agency agreement, you got two other things going for you as the buyer. That is the statute, the Michigan Occupational Code, Article 25, sets forth what the duties and obligations are of real estate licensees. Then you've got the Realtor Code of Ethics, which sets forth what a realtor will do, because people don't understand the difference between a real estate licensee and a realtor. They are different. Realtor is a professional trade organization. Real estate licensee simply means that the person possesses a license issued by the state of Michigan. So you've got those two things: statutory duties, realtor duties, contract duties. There are three things that the buyer's agent
Okay,
has to comply with.
Bill, I hire Mark Meyer, and I'm upset with him. I want to
Just to
Move-
clarify this, you'd never be upset with Mark.
move on to Laura and have her find me a house, but I don't want Mark to get any commission.
You have to
Do
look
you
at-
write that in or what?
You can't write that. You don't write that in. What happens is, in the original contract, you have to look at what the reason is that the person is upset with Mark Meyer. Why is she upset? Is it because Mark Meyer is not doing what he's supposed to be doing? Or is it because she's simply an unreasonable individual? Or finds
Why
a-
does it make any difference?
or
You want to
finds
get
a-
it? You want to?
She can always do it, but she may still be obliged to
Why would
pay
you-
a commission to Mark Meyer if the reason for termination is not a sufficient legal justification.
Well, you don't think they're doing a good job?
No, simply thinking they're not doing a good job is not enough. It's not like thinking real estate. There has to be a substantive, demonstrable, provable reason why they're terminating it. So
So once you hire an agent, you're stuck with that agent, kind of.
of course, that's why you
Right.
research in the first instance the
Okay.
qualifications of that agent, and when you sign a contract, it's like any other. It's not quite like any other contract because, as I say, you can always terminate the agency, but you may still be obliged to pay a fee. And the special thing about listing contracts and buyer agency contracts is, if you look at Motel Brokers versus Dowd, and it wasn't the first one to say this, but the agent must also have entered into a course of, quote, substantial performance, end quote. And what that simply means is that the listing agent, if Mark was representing a seller, he puts it in the MLS, he sets up signs, he sends out material. That's substantial performance. At that point, the person who signed the contract with Mark can't terminate it unless that person has legal justification to do so, which would be breach of the agreement by Mark.
Well, can't you're telling me you can't write it in that
In a purchase
if I'm
agreement?
unhappy and go to another agent, you're done.
No.
You get nothing.
Well, what you
you-
should
oh,
do
you
is
get
if
nothing.
you're unhappy, you should notify the agent you're working with and tell them. And
Well,
if, let's say it was,
obviously-
The answer is no. You can't do.
You
could-
can't write it down.
Well, like you could say you could write something like the contract may be terminated by the principal at any time for any reason. whether legally justified or not. You could put that in there, but as a broker, you'd never accept that language in the listing agreement or the buyer's agency agreement, because all that would happen is you'd go spend all this time, effort, and money in order to market the property or to find property. Lo and behold, under that language, you find the property, they say sayonara, I owe you nothing, you get nothing, and now the broker and the agent are left out in the cold. So they're not going to accept that.
The
So
biggest
the only way,
example
if they're
would
not
be,
doing their duty. Okay.
the
Yeah,
biggest
that-
example would be, let's say you and I signed a buyer agency contract, and you went out and found a for sale by owner, and
Right.
I've shown you 20, 30 houses, and I have not neglected you. I've connected you with a lender. We've talked about financing and inspections and the contract and what your needs and desires are, and I'm working hard to find you the house, but
Right.
lo and behold, you just stumble upon a for sale by owner and
Okay.
buy it.
Yeah.
Do you think I'm not entitled to my commission? Just because,
Kind of,
really, why?
because you didn't find me a house.
But you just drove past it.
Well, so what?
And maybe it wasn't
What if
even,
it fell down from the sky?
Because I'm not going to represent you as a real estate licensee if in fact you go out and find something else. I'm going to spend a lot of time and effort. The alternative is you can always pay me by the hour if you want to. You could do that. You could negotiate a contract with a real estate licensee and say, hey, look, I want you to work for me. The broker says, fine.
I understand
There are
that,
two ways
yeah.
I'm going to work for you. If you buy a property.
That's why I can't
Any
understand why you couldn't write it in that if you don't find me a property and I go to another,
well, you,
agent.
okay,
Let-
you
hold
could,
on, hold
well,
on.
wait a second.
Then you're out of the
you
mix.
Could,
Let-
you
let me-
could
let-
put
let me-
that, he's talking about in the
you
contract
can
with,
do it, but no
Right.
broker's going to accept that.
Right.
okay, all right.
Well,
Then
Yep.
let me give you the reverse of that. Let's suppose that it's a listing agreement.
I got
You're the-
Bill awake now.
You're
yeah,
the,
thank you.
You're the seller, okay?
Yeah.
You sign a listing agreement with a broker. The broker puts it in the MLS. The broker markets it, shows the property, has other agents show the property. Lo and behold, somebody's driving by. They come in from out of town. They're driving by. They see the sign, or maybe they just hear by word of mouth that it's
Right,
for sale.
and maybe it's not even on the market
this,
yet.
this is my wife. She's interrupting everything
Well,
I say.
if I didn't, I'd
Okay.
never get a word in it.
Well,
Joyce.
but
Good thing we're not in court.
She wants an answer to a question and she's not willing to listen.
Oh,
all right?
whatever.
So anyway, so now, but somebody hears by word of mouth, you've done all this work as a real estate licensee, your contract has to provide that if it's sold during the listing period to anyone who buys that property, whether I found them, whether another realtor found them, or whether they were found through some other source, I get paid a commission because I'm not going to waste my time, effort, and money in putting that property on the market and doing these things for you if I'm not going to get paid. The same is true with respect to a buyer's agent. The buyer's agent is nuts. You want a qualified buyer's agent to do these things for you, then you're going to pay them. You can negotiate with them to do it by the hour, but as a buyer, you're not going to be so happy about that because most buyer's agents get paid a commission from the listing broker. So in most circumstances, the buyer never even has to pay a fee. It comes out of the listing commission.
But
If it-
Greg, when you sign a buyer agency contract with me,
Yeah.
you're gonna understand the process of buyer agency. You're gonna understand that I'm working for you and that if you hear of another property that's not on the market with a realtor and you buy that without the benefit of my input, you're going to pay me a commission. You'll understand that when you sign that document. It'll be clear.
But more importantly, if you find a property for
probably-
sale by owner,
Well, that-
what the buyer ought to do is contact the buyer's agent and say, hey, look, there's this property I'm interested in. I want you to handle the negotiations for me because you're the knowledgeable professional. You don't just go out and as a buyer, if it's a for sale by owner, one of the worst things you can do is start negotiating with the seller on your own without knowledge of the market,
Right.
without the assistance of a professional. So, I mean, whether it's for sale by
Boy,
owner or
we have-
not, the buyer's agent is going to do a service for you.
The due diligence. I mean, we've seen it a lot where someone's tried to just ignore the realtor and buy a for sale by owner. Heck,
No, I understand that, but if you're unhappy with
if
the
you're
agent,
if you're unhappy with me, you call me. Tell me what you're unhappy about, and this is what I tell people. If I can't resolve that problem, then I'll release you from the contract.
Okay.
But you're going to tell me what it is you feel I'm
Okay.
not doing.
all right.
Right. But like I say, unhappiness is a relative thing, and sometimes unhappiness depends upon the circumstances. Because if I
Well,
can save a few thousand,
let's say it's justified.
well, Well, but justification is that the agent is not doing his or her job. That's what justification is.
Right.
You're inaccessible. You're not communicating on a timely basis. You're not lining up
That's
properties.
happened before in your industry, hasn't it?
Oh, sure,
yeah.
happens all the time.
Okay.
Happens in
all the time.
every industry.
Yeah.
Absolutely every industry. So with that said, so you had mentioned in the contract that there's a protection period. Now let's say I'm working with a buyer and the buyer buys a property that I showed them that had expired.
In other words, you showed it to them during the buyer's
Right,
agency
and actually
period.
wrote an offer on the property and the deal didn't come together. However, after the property expires, they purchase the
They purchase
property
it within
on the same
protection.
terms.
You've got a protection period of 6 months or 1 year following the date of expiration of the buyer's agency agreement. Your agreement provides, and most agreements provide, that if the property is sold to someone who was shown the property or to whom information was provided during the period of the buyer's agency contract, that if it's sold, etc., or if it's purchased within that protection period, you're entitled to a commission. Michigan courts have specifically upheld the right to a commission by the real estate broker during the protection period. There's no doubt about it. You can sue for it and collect the commission.
Do people do that?
Of course, I do that all the time on behalf of brokers. It's. Remember that most of my
Do you see
dealers-
many people that have to pay 2 brokers?
No, not usually.
That's
not
very
usually.
unusual.
That's more unusual, simply because the second broker, particularly if the second broker is a realtor, is pretty careful about making certain that there's no other agreement in place. And most realtor agreements provide that if you terminate the listing agreement and you go with another broker who's a realtor, that they won't be obliged for 2 commissions, because if it's within the realtor community, even though I was the lister and it's now terminated, if I find a buyer, I can still get a commission from the new realtor. So there's usually an exception carved out in a listing agreement if it's listed with another realtor. But it does happen where you're obliged to pay 2 brokers because you just didn't think about it. It happens more in a commercial setting where there are often not 2 realtors involved, they're just real estate licensees. But the years I've been in practice, I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of commission lawsuits. What's helped in the commercial industry is for all listing agreements and buyer's agency agreements entered into in non-residential deals after October 5, 2010, the broker is entitled to assert a statutory lien, much like a construction lien. That has resulted in my clients being able to use that threat of a lien very effectively, so that in commercial deals we're seeing fewer commission disputes, fewer commission lawsuits.
So rare residential.
In residential cases, you do see the complaints for commissions, but it's usually done in realtor arbitration. If 2 realtors are involved, one realtor claims a commission that's been paid to another realtor, the membership in the realtor organization absolutely requires that they arbitrate their dispute before a panel of realtors, so it doesn't end up in court in virtually every circumstance. But there's still plenty of arbitrations. We haven't seen as many over the last couple of years because the market has been pretty bad. Now that the market has improved, you're going to see more and more disputes.
Right, and there's more realtors getting in the business.
Yeah, those are common, but again, those are arbitrated. But litigation, the Broker Lien Act that was adopted by the legislature, and as I say, took effect in 2010, has made it so that in several circumstances I've used it already, say, hey, look, you're threatening not to pay my client a commission. You don't want to do that because we now have a statutory lien.
Could a realtor, could I put a lien on a residential property if the seller agrees?
You can. If the seller agrees in the listing contract, you are entitled to do it. You've got a little bit of a limitation under the, not truth in lending, truth in lending in terms of disclosure of what that secured lien is. But the answer is yes, and there are some brokers who actually in their contract provide that the seller grants them the authority to place a lien on the property to secure the payment of a commission.
We're running out of time, and you had 2 more topics, so as a teaser, I'll tell you what we're going to talk about in the future. One, you had some realtors ask about joint tenancy and ownership of property.
Right, joint tenancy and how you get out of a joint tenancy, etc.
Okay. And then I also was talking to a client yesterday who, and I think we're going to see more and more of this, in the days when the market was really bad, a lot of land contracts were used and rent with an option to buy. And now that those are coming due, what are the options? So
I can
we'll
talk. I can talk on any subject for any length of time, whether I know anything about it or not. I'm happy to.
Well, I don't know. You were
and,
worried.
and a
we were
shout
gonna-
out and a shout out to Troy Gannon. Hopefully, you're happy with today's program, Troy.
Okay, so I have a couple things. New listing at 209 3rd Street. It's a great, nice two-story home, 69.9, 4 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. It's over 1,900 square feet. And then 4900 Oak Point, beautiful home with over 280 feet of frontage on Wolf Lake Channel. With price reduction, 349,777. That's 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, over 3,500 square feet. 619 Winifred, price reduction 42.5. A cute little 3-bedroom, 1-bath home, just barely 1,000 square feet. And then on Sunday, 2 open houses, 1 to 2, the 4900 Oak Point, and then 3 to 4, 12455 North Crystal Lake, out by Meckley's. So when you go to Meckley's this weekend, on Sunday, stop by that open house.
Call Thinking Real Estate for more information.
780-3800.
It's time to shop for a